Well, welcome to another episode of Show Me Your RAID Log, where we talk with industry leaders about how they use RAID logs and similar tools to help project managers succeed. I'm Kim Essendrup, co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour podcast, and one of the founders of RAIDLOG.com. Now, I've been using RAID logs for years to save broken projects and to keep my own projects from getting too broken, and I'm really excited to see how other leaders use theirs. With me today to talk about RAID logs is Elizabeth Harrin. Elizabeth provides education and mentorship to project managers in person and online, to individuals and companies. She's a fellow of the Association of Project Management. Elizabeth has over 20 years of project management experience leading IT and business change projects across financial services and healthcare. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on the show and for making me sound really old. I feel like I've been around project management for so long now.
Oh, well, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience, though. What kind of things are you doing right now in the project management world?
Well, at the moment, I'm working in healthcare. I'm working on large capital investment projects. So it's really interesting to do something slightly different from technology, because while a lot of big machines plug into the wall and need to be connected to IT, the process is quite different, and the impact when you're installing something that you can physically see it is really good and really powerful. So I'm enjoying it. It's great to be delivering all kinds of different variety of projects and seeing a different part of the healthcare world.
So those sound like fun projects.
Yes, yeah, it's good. I do like healthcare because I'm sure some of your listeners will be in that field as well. But one of the clear benefits, I suppose, for me as a project professional is that I can actually see the difference that I'm making. And I know prior to healthcare, I worked in insurance for a while, and that's an industry where you sell a product and you make money hoping that no one ever uses it. Whereas in healthcare, while we don't want people to be ill, as a project manager, if I'm installing computers into an operating room or putting in a new X-ray machine or supporting hospitals to have new equipment of some kind, it's really clear to see the link between what we deliver as project managers and the change in the benefits that we're delivering. So healthcare, if you are listening to this thinking about what industry you would want to work in, healthcare technology is amazing and really rewarding.
And it's very dynamic. There's always something going on there.
Always something. Yeah. Regulation changes and compliance requirements and all the other things that go alongside that.
As the father of two kids, soon to be three, that work in the healthcare field, I thank you very much for your contributions there. I'm sure it really helps them out.
Oh, I'm sure I don't do hardly anything in comparison to our frontline workers, but it's nice to play a small part.
Well, can I ask you a few questions about one of my favorite PM tools, the RAID logs, and how you use them?
Of course. That's what I'm here. Ask away. I've been looking forward to this because RAID logs are a subject that, well, I use it every day. So you go ahead.
Well, let's start at the beginning then. Can you tell us about how you first learned about RAID logs?
That's a really interesting question because I don't really remember a time as a project manager that I didn't have one. And so it must have been quite early on in my career when I was doing my first project management course, for example, which was an in-house course put on by my employer at the time. And I think it must have been covered in that training material because it's just become an accepted part of how I run projects and how the people around me run projects as well. So even if they haven't particularly used them in the past, after having worked with me, I think they see the benefit because it's such a useful tool. I don't know how people manage without. So I think I've probably found it as a tool quite early on in my career and then just stuck with it because it works.
You know, I feel I have the same background, and I think a lot of more senior project managers have the same background in that. Well, I don't remember when I learned about it, but it feels like it's always been there, and it's always been an integral part of what we do.
Exactly, and maybe I picked it up from a more experienced colleague, or maybe it was a dedicated part of this course. I'm a Prince 2 practitioner. Well, I took the exam a while ago. I imagine it's probably expired by now, but while RAID is not a Prince 2 term, you don't get examined on that. It's something that, logs are very much fundamental to tracking and monitoring all of the things that we do on projects. And it just makes sense to have them all in the same place. So RAID for me is more than just those 4 things that RAID stands for, but it's just a sensible central location for all of the stuff I need to know about my project so I can manage and control it better.
Well, now, can you share with us a time that using a RAID log helped you save a project or kept you from having to save and rescue a project?
I think because it's such a fundamental tool, listing all out the actions, I would say the action tracker, the action log, is probably the most likely to keep me out of trouble section of the RAID log, simply because it keeps that archive of who did what when did I last speak to somebody. And when I start to feel overwhelmed on a project, or when there's a lot going on, I can come back to that and say, okay, start at the top, work down the list. What do I need to do? How do I need to chase these people up? How can I move these actions forward? And you can see things that have been on there for months and all of the debate and discussion that's gone around it, which tells you that you need to get on and do something about it. So I would say I can't remember a time where there's been a huge disaster and the RAID log has saved me in that respect, but just generally keeping me on track, being able to see how we got to this point, avoiding rework, because we can look back and say, well, we did this, we made this decision. Why are we making it again? Why have we forgotten that we've taken this course of action for this reason? It's always fine to change your mind, and maybe we do need to revisit, but let's just remind ourselves of why we chose that route in the first place before we remake the decision. Because do we have any new information? What's changed that would, and that has happened before, where my project sponsor has changed his mind about something, and we documented the decision that he had made previously. So I was able to put back to him in writing, that's fine, we can totally do that. But just as a reminder, 6 weeks ago, your steer on this activity was whatever, because of whatever reason. And if that's changed, that's fine, but just wanted to clarify. And in that instance, he did actually come back and say, oh no, let's stick with the original plan. So, they're small things, but they're all about control and performance management and governance, and making sure that you're on track so you don't get into any of the bigger problems.
So true. So true. And it's as hard as it is for project managers to task switch between project to project. If you're managing multiples, it's got to be even harder for our sponsors, stakeholders, and other team members. I mean, this is our job. This is, something different for these stakeholders. And so I can see how that really helps us keep not just ourselves, but our stakeholders and sponsors on track, and helps us with our memory.
Well, that's part of our role, isn't it? To manage up and to help people make the best decisions, to help people be smart about how they work. And if we've got those records, then they don't have to have it in their head, because they can rely on us. And that action log, the risk log, the issue log, decisions, dependencies, changes, contact list, whatever you want to chuck in there, is kind of the institutional memory of the project. And it solves that problem of them having to remember everything, because it's documented. So it is just a really useful resource, I think, for feeling in control, and importantly, evidencing to other people that you actually are in control.
Very, very true. Very true. Now, when using RAID logs, have you had any specific pain points that you've struggled with typical spreadsheet-based RAID logs?
Yes, I tend to use a spreadsheet because I like it, but on a project, we just ended up with hundreds and hundreds of actions because it went on for a very long time. And one of the challenges that we had was I needed to get updates from the team, and I didn't want them to be messing with my spreadsheet, because I needed to know what the updates were. So instead of saying to everybody, have access to this and then add on whatever updates you want, and then I'd have to read it and try to remember what's new, what's not new, they'd either have to update it in a different color, or I'd just send them an extract of just their tasks, and then they'd update that and I'd copy and paste it in. So that sort of version control has always been a bit of a challenge with the spreadsheet system, especially when there's a lot going on. There's team members who you trust implicitly to do their own updates. You don't have to nag them for it or anything, but actually, if they update it and you don't know, and then someone asks you a question, you're working off old information. So just to try and keep all of that aligned and keep the version control. And the way I found around that is just to be really controlled. Nobody messes with my RAID log. Nobody puts anything in it unless I know about it. I'm not sure that's the best way to work, but it's meant that we've all got the right level of visibility for the roles that we do.
I find that's common among most project managers, is the RAID log is sacred. It's their tool, so they have to
Yep.
own it.
Don't even put filters on it, please. It's all set out the way I want.
Now, what do you have a favorite tip or trick when using your RAID logs that you can share?
I think one of the things that I found really useful that I don't see everybody do by default, but it's worth looking at if it's relevant, is to add an extra column into a spreadsheet, or to start thinking about how you could do that in the tools that you use for the trigger date or risk proximity. So if you're looking at risks, we typically look at how likely is this going to be, and what damage would it do to our project if it happened. But one of the other fields that's quite useful with risk management is to think about proximity, which is how, if this happens, how soon is it going to hit us? Because even a small risk that's going to land next week probably takes more of your focus than a big risk that's not going to hit you for 2 years, because you've got time for that. So to think about that distance, how much slack time have we got before we have to care about this, can be really useful for prioritizing, especially on a bigger program or a bigger piece of work where you've got lots of risks and perhaps multiple work streams. There's a lot to focus on. Risk management is such a huge drain on people's time, if I'm honest. I mean, we do it because we have to, because it's a sensible thing to do, but I've never met anybody who loves it, really. So to make sure that we're focusing our energies on the things that are going to make the most difference is really helpful, I think.
I love that tip, because a tool like a RAID log is very much about being operationally minded and what's going on right now. What do I have to worry about now? What do I have to worry about next? What's this week's priorities, next week's priorities? And having the ability to pull in risks into that planning horizon, that's very, very useful.
I don't do it on every project, but on the projects where it makes sense to, it's useful. So anyway, that was my tip.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one more bonus question here. On your RAID logs, we talk about risks, actions, issues, and decisions. What's your favorite extension beyond those 4 tabs?
Change. I like a lot of what changes have we approved? Or more to the point, what changes have we not yet approved that are in the pipeline to be approved? Because then it becomes almost an agenda item on our next team meeting of what's still in the pipeline that we have to discuss. Do we want to do it? How are we going to get the decision about what to do? And then we've also got that record in a similar place to everything else. If we say, yes, we're going to do it, then that brings us scope issues potentially, or risks we have to add on, more actions to do. We have to update the schedule. And then at least we've got some record in one place of what we've discussed with changes.
That's a great addition. Thank you. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your project management experience. If our audience wants to find out more about what you're up to, how can they best do that?
I would say you can find me online at rebelsguide2pm.com, which is my project management website, my blog, or you can just find me on LinkedIn. I'm generally online every day, and so I'll pick up messages. We also have a Facebook group, Project Management Cafe. I hang out in there as well. And it would be lovely to connect with some of your listeners.
Outstanding. I highly recommend that they do so too. So thank you so much for joining us and showing us your RAID log.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Cheers. For our audience, if you'd like to step up your project management game, you can check out our new RAIDLog application at raidlog.com. We're bringing the tried and true RAIDlog into the 21st century with the only platform dedicated to giving project managers the tools that they need to succeed in project delivery, starting with the RAIDlog. Come check it out at raidlog.com.